So now we know the media useful idiots were used repeatedly. Don't worry, tell Flynn he wasn't an active target. Was he? Yeah, he was, but just lie for us. Don't worry, tell Flynn he did nothing wrong. Is he? Well, we think he did. That's why we're going to interview him tomorrow. Well, why would we say he did nothing wrong? Because we want to put him at ease. So now the question comes up because we found out today that acting director of national intelligence, the great Rick Grenell, who gives exactly zero, you can fill in the blanks about what the media says about him, is declassifying and putting the truth out there for people to see about the whole Spygate drama, and it's driving the media mad. But the Daily Wire has an interesting piece up in the show notes today. Who leaked Mike Flynn's name? Now, remember, I'm going to set this up first because the running story we've been told by the media, and I just laid out how the media has been complicit in this whole thing, but the story we've been told by the media and their deep state co-conspirators here is that Mike Flynn's call with the Russian ambassador Kislyak in December of 2016, after the election, but before Trump takes office, we know he's going to be the incoming national security advisor. We've been told that that call was tracked and listened to because Mike Flynn was unmasked as part of routine surveillance of Russians. We've been told that, but is that true? Daily Wire piece. U.S. officials have declassified the list of Obama officials who were involved in unmasking General Flynn by Ryan Saavedra. Here's what's interesting. If Flynn's name was unmasked, meaning they were listening to the Russians and they picked up some U.S. person talking to him about sanctions and stuff and all this other thing, and later on they said, we need to know who that is, and they said, unmask him. And they, wow, look, it's Mike Flynn. What does that give them? It gives them kind of, as Joe started up the show today, a golly out. Oh, man, I don't know. We just listen to the Russians, which we do. We listen to the Russians all the time. Wiretap them, it's not really a wiretap anymore, but you get it. That's kind of a word people use. We listen to Russians all the time. This gives them an out saying, oh, Mike Flynn just happened to appear on a call we were listening to on the Russians. We weren't targeting him. Were you really? From the Daily Wire piece. This would be interesting because you can't have it both ways now. Fox News reported in 2017 that the disclosing of Flynn's identity, in other words, they unmasked him and they said, oh, that's Mike Flynn they're talking to. Let's see his name. The leaking of that to the media is a felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison because the rule states that if an American with constitutional protections is collaterally caught in such surveillance, his or her identity must be protected. Why do I put this first? Because, ladies and gentlemen, there is an interesting conundrum developing right now for the leftists, their media hacks, and the police state supporters who love this whole Spygate thing. They think it's great that Obama targeted his political opponents and abused his power. Obama will go down as the most corrupt president in U.S. history. I have absolutely no doubt. I don't even care who writes the history anymore. There's no way to hide this. What's the conundrum? If Flynn his call with the Russians was kind of caught up in a trap and no one was targeting Flynn. In other words, they were just listening to the Russian ambassador as a matter of course. They heard this guy talking from the Dominican Republic who turned out to be Flynn. They unmasked his name later. Like, oh my gosh, that's Mike Flynn. Well, his name was leaked to the media. The Washington Post wrote a story about it later on, David Ignatius, in the January-February timeframe where they start writing about this. And Flynn's name was leaked. That's a felony. Option one, he was unmasked and they leaked his name, and some deep state slob committed a felony by leaking his name. But what about option two? You're like, what is option two? You haven't discussed it yet. That's what I'm here for. What if Flynn wasn't unmasked? Something we've hinted at for a long time. Wasn't unmasked. Well, if he wasn't unmasked, then how would they have known it was Mike Flynn? All they would have had was a call with the Russian ambassador with some dude in the Dominican Republic. They would have never known his name, right? That's what unmasking is. You take the redaction off his name. Oh my gosh, that was Mike Flynn on the call. Well, we know they know it's Mike Flynn on the call because that's what the FBI shows up for the interview with a transcript of the call. With Mike Flynn. They don't go, hey, Mike, some guy in the Dominican that sounds like you was talking to the Russian ambassador in December. They walk with a transcript of the call because they know it's Flynn. So if he wasn't unmasked, what is option two? Was there a FISA on Mike Flynn? Was that? No, wait, shh. Don't talk about that. Was there a FISA warrant on Mike Flynn? Was there a FISA warrant to spy on a 3-star general? of our U.S. and the former director of the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency? Was there a FISA warrant on him too? And was that FISA warrant signed off on way before the October 2016 FISA warrant was signed off on Carter Page, which would throw the FBI's whole story in the garbage? You know what the FBI story? Oh, what story are you talking about, Dan? Oh, yeah, the FBI's official story is we only opened up the case to spy on the Trump team July 31st of 2016 because we got a tip from Australia about this Trump kid, Papadopoulos, talking about Hillary's emails. That's their official story. It's all garbage, that story. Don't even waste your time with that stupidity. But what if earlier in July, the FBI was either seeking or received a FISA warrant to spy on Mike Flynn? Gosh, that would be really bad, wouldn't it? Considering, number one, they had no reason to spy on a 3-star general outside of politics because he was working with the Trump campaign at the time. And number two, it would make the Papadopoulos July 31st opening story kind of sound like BS, wouldn't it? Because it is. Well, Dan, what evidence do you have of that? Come on, guy. You got to produce. That's what I'm here for. You know, it's interesting. Around July 18th and July 19th, there's a series of Peter Strzok, Lisa Page texts. July 18th or July 19th of 2016. Remember, they're saying the FBI, they didn't open up the case for another 11, 12 days until July 31st. Those July 18th and July 19th texts, before they open up, are heavily redacted. They take place right after an interview. Follow me. If this gets a little complicated, I'm sorry, but man, is this juicy. This juicy fruit. Used to love that gum. Lasted for 5 seconds, but it was the best 5 seconds your mouth has ever seen. Those July 18th, July 19th texts happen right after Mike Flynn is kind of ambush interviewed by Michael Isikoff, the same fake news specialist who leaked the Obama recording yesterday. Leaked it. Yeah, that guy. The guy who's been knee-deep in the Russia hoax from day one. Isikoff ambushes Flynn about foreign contacts in an interview right in that same time frame. The same time frame, Strzok and Page are texting each other. The redactions are heavy. Why would they be heavy? Are they talking about in those texts a FISA warrant on Flynn? And are they using this Isikoff interview with Mike Flynn where he hits him on this phone? Are they using that as a basis to buttress their claims that they need a FISA warrant on Mike Flynn? Because remember, a FISA warrant has two components. It's not the first one. The first one's easy to get. In order to get a FISA warrant to spy on an American, you need two things. Any American, Mike Flynn included. Number one, they are acting on behalf of a foreign power. You may say, gosh, that sounds like a crime in and of itself. You sure? Because lobbyists act on behalf of foreign governments all the time. Of course it's not a crime. You have to meet number two. And the second part is you have to act on behalf of a foreign power in violation of some U.S. law. That is the only way to get a FISA warrant on an American citizen. What U.S. law was Mike Flynn breaking? None. He was never charged with a violation of U.S. law other than the fake lying to the FBI charge, ever. Did they get a fake FISA in early July? Or a real FISA based on fake information, precision matters? Ooh, that would be really, really bad. Is this unmasking thing where he was unmasked and as Joe said to me, oh, golly, man, Mike Flynn just fell into this surveillance trip with nothing to do with us. We were just listening to the Russians. Is that wrong? Was Mike Flynn actually the target the whole time? And the surveillance of the Russian ambassador was all secondary? Now, you may say this sounds all kind of anecdotal. Fair enough, but don't worry. I always bring more evidence to the table. Don't you worry. So let's look at this Washington Post article. This is a fascinating. This is from the same January 23rd article. Remember the day before they interviewed Flynn, January 24th of 2017, the FBI at the White House. They put out the article I discussed earlier in the show, the January 23rd article. Don't worry, Flynn. We found nothing wrong with your calls. You know, the media useful idiots. But in that article, hat tip Stephen McIntyre at Climate Audit on Twitter for the screenshots. They always make the highlights easier. Embedded in that article is something fascinating. Although Flynn's contacts from the Washington Post with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak were listened to, Flynn himself is not the active target of an investigation, officials said. Oh, hey, don't worry, buddy.
Yeah.
Don't worry. He wasn't the target. Why would you say that?
Right.
And why would you say that to your useful media idiots like these Washington Post reporters who will dutifully print it? Well, you would say it because, again, you don't want anybody to look in that direction. That was Flynn actually a FISA target himself? And this, no, don't worry. He was not at those all into unmasking. We were listening to the Russia. We're listening to the Soviets. Don't you worry about it. And Flynn he shouldn't have called him. He fell in this trap. We weren't looking at Flynn. Kind of interesting how they say that he wasn't the target of an investigation, and these media people doing no research at all just print it. Well, you may say, Dan, again, whatever so you're saying he was a target, but the Washington Post said he wasn't, so it's got to be true. Joe, right? Come on, again, Joe, just a dumb audio engineer, me just some dopey cop. What do we know? The Washington Post said he wasn't a target. Clearly he wasn't, man. Right. Well, of course, the Washington Post are morons. Here's the actual Mueller report from hack Bob Mueller, who was forced to write this. Previously, the FBI had opened an investigation of Flynn based on his relationship with the Russian government. I don't know who to believe. Really, I'm not kidding. Who do you believe? Corrupt Bob Mueller or the corrupt Washington Post? I don't know. And what's interesting is that footnote there is attributed to DOJ officials, Mary McCord and that whole crew. McCord, who took over for Carlin, that whole DOJ crew in the National Security Division, where they had to admit Flynn was a target of an investigation. And we already know an investigation was opened up on Flynn August 16th of 2016 after Stephen Halper showed up 5 days earlier at FBI headquarters and had some information about Mike Flynn. Information that, of course, was fake.
You just heard the Dan Bongino Show. You can also get Dan's podcasts on iTunes or SoundCloud. And follow Dan on Twitter 24/7 @DBongino.